Hand checking has been the rule that gets the most attention in basketball debates about different eras. But if you go back and watch a game from the 90s, it's the illegal defense rule that really dominates the game.
Michael Jordan's illegal now, so the Bulls are all running around.
And it's their second illegal defense, which will result in a technical foul shot being taken.
In Game 6 of the '98 Finals, the Bulls were called for 3 illegal defenses in just the first quarter. The rules were designed to strictly enforce man-to-man defense. A defender had to either guard his own man or leave his man completely and commit to a double team. The rules didn't allow for anything in between.
Another illegal defense.
That's on Michael Jordan. He got 2 zones below his man. Hornacek stayed out behind the three-point line. Michael dropped down 2 areas.
Because of the illegal defense rules, offensive spacing was much different. The Utah Jazz went to this alignment throughout Game 6. Instead of putting players on the weak side, they'd post up Karl Malone and place all 3 players off the ball bunched together in the middle of the court. Here you can see them literally pointing at Michael Jordan, the illegal defender. In 2001, there were critics of the NBA's decision to change the illegal defense rules. Pat Riley called it a huge mistake, saying it would lead scoring back to the 70s. He also added that isolation basketball was going to be history. Up until then, teams could simply clear one side of the floor and let a player go one-on-one.
You know, when the league changed the rules, I think we had to adapt and try to look at what you could now do with the rules to try to take advantage of that.
With the hindsight of knowing how basketball evolved today, Riley's comments seem ridiculous. But initially, there was some truth to them. After those rule changes, Tom Thibodeau's style of defense became popular, which involved loading up to the ball and keeping it on one side of the floor. Tibbs won a ring as associate head coach for the Celtics. Before the rule changes, that style of defense would have been illegal. What Pat Riley ultimately didn't anticipate was the explosion in three-point shooting, which is the best antidote for that Tibbs style of loading up to the ball.
But the game also changed because in the 90s, it was more of a power game where there were, you know, your small forward oftentimes would be basically a power forward. Then with the rule changes and not being able to play as physical, I think more skill came into the game. So now you have small forwards that are playing the power forward position, and oftentimes there's 4 shooters on the floor. So it put a lot more pressure on your defense.
But even still, keeping the ball on one side of the floor remains common in today's game, especially when it comes to ball screen coverages, where many college teams still use Tibbs's ice coverage, which prevents the ball handler from using the screen. Texas Tech, with Chris Beard and Mark Adams, have taken the no-middle style to another level. The Red Raiders aggressively forced the ball baseline on all plays, not just ball screens. In 2019, they made the national championship game and also finished with the best defensive efficiency rating of the 21st century. The reason for keeping the ball out of the middle is to avoid situations like this. With the ball in the center of the court, it's harder for the defense to commit to help. The passer can easily see all of his options, and the length of the shorter pass gives defenders less time to recover. That's been a talking point over the years for Nick at the B-Ball Breakdown channel. He's served as a pundit for the no-middle style of defense.
If he's going to penetrate down here and he helps all the way over, it's a very simple quick pass, catch and shoot, and he can nail that all day. Now let's talk a little bit about a pet peeve of mine, helping one pass away. Today I want to talk about one of my big pet peeves, helping one pass away. I'm sure you've all heard me rant and rave about it for the last 3 years.
On longer skip passes out to the opposite side of the floor, defenders have more time to recover on the flight of the longer pass.
This is where the help was going to come from the weak side, turning and running to get over here. Okay? That is the best way and the most sound way to help out on defense, because at least it'll force 1 or 2 more passes that maybe you can recover towards.
For no-middle defenses, the help comes from the lowest defender on the court. The key for that help defender is to be early, preferably meeting the ball outside of the paint for a charge or a block shot. That aggressive helping will lead to 3-point attempts on the weak side. The offenses with the most success against Texas Tech are the ones with optimally spaced shooters, making it very difficult for the defense to zone up and recover. This season, Baylor was another elite defense to switch to the no-middle style. They use their length and athleticism to scramble in these situations. But it does take great length and athleticism, and without it, the threes you would have given up by helping one pass away are simply going to turn into these skip pass threes instead. Even with coaches copying the success of Texas Tech, the pack line defense is still the most popular scheme in college basketball, which was created by Dick Bennett.
I want everyone off the ball in this pack area, but if you're on the ball, I want you up into the ball as much as you can. We want them to get to the elbows if they're not involved on the ball. We want them to get to that help area as quickly as they can.
The pack line prioritizes early help, which is much different from no middle. Players one pass away position themselves in the gap, providing support to the ball. The on-ball defender's job isn't to keep the ball out of the middle, it's to influence the ball into the gap. Instead of completely committing to the ball from one pass away, pack line defenders stunt at the ball to be in 2 places at once. Or as Fran Fraschilla says, creating the perception that the defense is quicker than it really is. Theoretically, stunting instead of helping gives you a better chance at recovery, but recovery is still a difficult task for a pack line defense. Dick Bennett's son, Tony, is the head coach at Virginia, and his pack line defense consistently gives up threes, but they were also #1 in the country in defensive efficiency this season despite that.
You're vulnerable to the 3-point shot because you're not out on shooters in your initial positioning. The toughest part, I believe, in today's game of playing out of a pack or containment is not all of those other things. They can be taught and held on to, but what is so difficult is closing out on the ball, getting to the shooter. Today's game, if you're going to play this way, you got to learn to be in 2 places at once. You got to be able to basically, in fact, I used to say there's no such thing as helping anymore. It's all recovery. You're in the help position so that you can recover quickly. You can't go in 2 directions and cover these shooters.
Here, Braxton Key is in gap position early so that instead of having to go in 2 directions, he can simply recover straight to the shooter. Because of the rise of 3-point shooting, NBA defenses have trended in a different direction, helping only when absolutely necessary. This is different from both the no-middle and the pack line, and in some ways is actually a return to the man-to-man during the illegal defense era. Instead of giving up 3-point shots, Michigan has built their defense on simply guarding the ball one-on-one and living with the results. Luke Yaklich was the initial architect of that Michigan defense, and on my Solving Basketball podcast, he talked about the philosophy of staying with shooters and being okay with the offense scoring on ISO situations.
Coach B would always say it's 2 points. They can win a highlight, but we're gonna win the game. And I think it's a mindset that you just have to have, that if your players know what you're going to give up, that stuff's going to happen. And you know, we never got worked up about it.
St. Mary's and Michigan are the two college programs who have most strongly adopted this help only when necessary style of the NBA. But even the NBA will deviate from it. Like last year in the playoffs when all the talk was on opponent defenses building a wall against Giannis.
Check out the wall that the Celtics are going to form.
They did a tremendous job of loading up to Giannis and basically forming a wall.
But Toronto, as you may have heard, is building a wall to close down Giannis's driving angles.
That wall is essentially the pack line defense. Giannis is such a dynamic threat, teams were willing to help one pass away. And that leads me to the final point. Personnel matters. The better the player with the ball and the worse the shooter one pass away, the more it makes sense to help. In 2019, Duke had probably the two best drivers in the entire country, Zion Williamson and RJ Barrett, and almost no shooting around them. Of course, defenses helped early and often, daring players like Trey Jones to shoot. So the decision to help one pass away ultimately depends on personnel and scheme. One way of playing defense isn't necessarily better than another way. The Texas Tech no middle, the Virginia pack line, and the Michigan help only when necessary have all been three of the best defenses in the country. Defense is a game of trade-offs. Against good offenses, you're going to have to give something up. And because of that, building a defensive scheme ultimately requires deciding what you're willing to give up. Thank you very much for watching. Help us out by subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. We also have full-length videos on both pack line and no middle that will be available for purchase this summer at the Hoop Vision store. They'll cover the top teams using those defenses and the different ways opponents attack them. Sign up for our newsletter now and you'll be notified immediately when those are available. There's a link to that in the description.